For a moment he was transported back to the islands of the summer seas, and inhaled again the perfume of the flowering cinnamon and the musky scent left around the villages at night by roving civets. The warm coral sand scrunched underfoot once more, and the glory of birdsong filled his ears, sounds so ethereal that tears pricked his eyelids. He wrenched himself into the present. Scupper that. The plume was uncanny, and it held him in thrall. He knew that and fought it. So why was it a battle where victory always seemed just out of reach? On his last voyage, he'd seen men in Cotabanta happily disintegrate into drooling fools after inhaling the smoke of burned tree sap. Such madness. The rational part of his mind told him he was like that, drugged, no longer in command of his own destiny, captured, not by smoke, but by cursed sorcery from the Va-forsaken hemisphere. That bastard scut Heron. He's to blame. Appalling snatches of the day they'd met, not fully recalled and never quite in focus, floated through his memory. He couldn't dismiss them as inaccurate. They stayed, nagging, an ache eroding his sanity. Tolbin, his first mate, had even bluntly told him that the whole ship's company wondered at the way he fawned before Heron and puzzled over why he'd ever allowed that flirt skirt and her squalling baby on board. He knew his behavior was deranged, yet couldn't change it. One day soon, Factor Heron, I'll see you keel-raked, your skin shredded on the barnacles, your back flayed to the bone, and if you survive that, I'll hang you from the yardarm. As for that lewdster female, he'd throw her overboard with the baby in her arms. Light skirt and babe, they were in this together, and they would die together, rot them both. The dream was pleasant, but if he thought too hard about ways of turning it into reality, his stomach cramped and his head ached as if his skull had been cleaved. The moment he wanted to speak to anyone about Heron, his words dried up in his mouth, or turned to paeans in praise of the man. He'd discovered it was better to say nothing. Sometimes he wondered about the Lascar and his crew, too. After all, he was a Va-forsaken nutskin. Maybe he ought to throw him overboard, just in case. He closed his eyes and considered the idea. Voster and Fells, two of the ship's swabbies, they were a couple of rogues who could make an accident happen. If he paid them enough, they'd even resist the temptation to wag their tongues about it afterwards. Tempting, but no. Ardhi the Lascar was a blistering good sailor. The way he scampered about the rigging in the roughest of weather like a giddy-brained spider. Besides, he and Heron were teaching the crew and the factors how to speak Pashali. If he did rid the ship of Heron, he'd need Ardhi alive to teach, or they'd be at a disadvantage in spice negotiations. Better still, the Lascar came from the Nutmeg Islands and knew all about the paradise birds. He hadn't managed to pry much out of the man yet, but he would. There were ways. His fingers aching with nebulous desire, he forced himself to thread the plume back into the bamboo. He flattened his hands on the desk, waiting for his fingers to cease their trembling. "Banstill!" he roared. The cabin door opened immediately, and his cabin boy stepped inside. The lad had finally understood it was best not to keep the commander of the fleet waiting. Unfortunately, his hair was stuck with what looked to be hay, and his shoes were filthy. "You smell like a goat," he snapped. "Next time you come in here looking like a street urchin, your backside will be striped and you'll be sleeping on your stomach for a week. Understand?" "Aye, sir." "Tell Minster Yonner Coulthier to report here immediately. Then bring us a carafe of rum cider, nicely mulled." Forgetting to acknowledge the order verbally, the lads scurried out.